Well, it's finally time to stop talking about it and start installing this new Kraken and take out the old one. Yes, hello folks. Well, of course, as you know, the Kraken needs no introduction. If you haven't already seen it, I've done a bit of an overview / review of this new low mount style manifold for the Mazda MX-5. And today it's finally time to start pulling everything out of this hot side of the engine and putting in the new one. Obviously, I'm currently running the existing Kraken kind of top mount or high mount style manifold. It's under there in the engine bay under all the heat shielding. So there's a bit of work to do today. We've got to pull it all out and start putting this guy in. Hopefully we get a fair way through the job today. Probably not completing it, but to get started, let me talk you through all the bits and pieces that are involved here and what we're going to need to do to get this guy in. I should also add, if you didn't see the last video, I'm going to basically donate that Kraken to one of you, so please watch this video so you can find out how to get it for free, just because I love you. Okay, so welcome to my engine bay. We're going to be largely working on the hot side, so this side of the engine, and it involves effectively removing the heat shield, all of the kind of ducting pipe work, some of these hoses. Got a couple of coolant hoses down here that also need to be disconnected. To get to the manifold that lives under this shield, undo the manifold. We'll have to get underneath the car and undo the rest of the exhaust further along down below to be able to get this turbo gear out. Once it's out, we have to disassemble the turbo from the manifold and the turbo from the downpipe, and then fit up the new bits. So we've got a new low mount style Kraken to go between the engine and the turbo, and then we've got a new dump pipe to go between the turbo and the rest of the exhausts. Changing those two components means a few other bits might need to change, such as the way the oil feed comes in, such as the way the oil drain works, and then also the two coolant lines, plus the intake pipe here, which feeds air into the turbo, and then this outlet which feeds the boosted air, although hot, into the intercooler to be cooled back down again. And hopefully not too much else, maybe even the wastegate actuator, because we're going to have to clock the turbo, unfortunately. So there's a little bit of jigging to do. Hopefully a lot of that stuff doesn't need too much modification, such as all these hoses and lines. The thing I'm slightly sad is I'm going to be losing my heat shield, which I think I'm onto about the third heat shield already, because I keep making them and then making changes, which means I have to change or make a new heat shield. Unfortunately, another new manifold means another new heat shield, and I'm so sad because I'm getting fond of this one. Anyway, that's the story. Let's start doing the doing. Alright, so some of the shields and things are off, and now we can actually see how the old Kraken's doing. The first thing I noticed, which is of most significance, is that this bolt here was loose, which is not good. So thankfully it looks like the gasket's held up okay, and there's a bit of black there, but I don't think that's from sort of a leak. So I think the other nuts are all studs with the nuts, they're all done up quite tight, and this one being loose hasn't really cost me anything. But otherwise, it's all coming apart okay so far. But that's kind of the easy bits, really. But to be honest, it looks perfect. Obviously, it's had a few nice, really hot heat cycles now, but this thing has been holding up to the abuse that I've been throwing at it very, very well, without an issue at all, really. I'm very impressed, and it's looking used, but it's looking like it's handling the abuse perfectly fine. with the exception of a single nut or bolt that's come loose, which is actually my own bolt that I put in there. So who would have thunk that the thing I do breaks? But yeah, it's just come loose. It hasn't broken, I should say. It's just come loose from being not torqued down enough or not being res bonded in or whatever. So, but yeah, going great so far. I guess I'll persist with undoing a few more bits. Probably oil and coolant lines next. So I thought while we're at this stage, we can sort of talk through some of the differences between the current setup here with the manifold coming up to the turbo and the Kraken where the manifold comes down to the turbo and it hangs below down here. So, I mean, obviously the fundamental difference is the turbo position. There are a few other things that are affected by that. So obviously currently oil feed comes straight in the top. I have two coolant lines either side of the CHRA that go straight down. With this new setup, oil feed can't go straight in the top, so it has to come in from an angle at the side here, or perhaps kind of at the top, but definitely not straight in the top. Also, the coolant lines, I don't know how easy they'll be to get to, because at the moment there's plenty of room here. I can get to this side, plenty of room on this side. It's actually clear. It's the banjo for it is above this frame rail here, which means it's quite easy to get to. Whereas with this one, if we take into account that the sort of the center of the turbo, you know, the center of the turbine is in line with the manifold holes, kind of thing. So it's coming straight out, up, across and down, and then that center point is about there. Whereas we look at this setup, sorry, it's heavy. Our manifold or our engine is feeding its exhaust gases into this hole here. The turbo is hanging quite a ways down, so we're talking a couple of inches, probably at least 3 or 4 to that center point where the turbo sits, so to speak, which puts the turbo, instead of being where it is here, it puts it somewhere around where my hand is here, or sort of where my fist is here, which is quite a lot lower. Obviously it means that the sort of real estate up here becomes a lot more free. It makes things look a lot tidier, a lot more discreet. However, there are obviously a few downsides to that. Most notably is just general access to pretty much everything. As I mentioned, oil lines, for example, are going to be harder to route. But similarly, things like these water lines are going to be much lower, which means they'll be much closer to the subframe and the steering rack, which is down here. And if you were still running a heater, if you were running the original water neck down here that goes into the water pump, none of the OEM stuff is going to fit very nicely. I'm pretty sure the water neck definitely doesn't fit. You have to modify it or flip it upside down or something, and then make up some custom hose work, you know what I mean. In my case, I've already got a modified water neck here because I'm running the electric water pump, which means that won't be a problem for me. However, I do think that this water line here and the way it comes out of this neck is possibly going to be right in the way of where the turbo needs to live, so that means that'll need to be modified. Also, just the general access to bolts. At the moment, the manifold to turbo bolts, so there's 2 up here and there's 2 that are underneath, are all pretty nicely accessible. However, the good thing with this setup is that you can assemble them off the car and then install the turbo with the manifold as a single unit onto the car after it's been assembled and tightened up, which is really convenient. I don't know how well this would do. I think you can probably do that with this one. The other upside with this setup is that I can actually install it with the 2 water lines pretty much pre-installed on turbo as well, which again makes installation easier because you can bolt this up and then I just need to take the sort of tail ends of those water lines and hook them up to the car. Whereas with this new setup, there may be a chance that won't quite work. I don't know, it probably won't be a problem. The other most notable kind of luxury or convenience is the dump side, so the back of the turbo here. This particular setup has the kind of 2-piece dump where we've got a small elbow, which has then a V-band to the rest of the dump pipe. Whereas the new setup with the new Kraken low mount it's a single piece dump, and that single piece dump bolts much deeper down into that engine bay area, much lower down. Being a single piece, you can't really attach that before you install it on the car because it's quite long. So I think chances are you'd probably install the turbo first, then feed the dumper up from underneath, but then you've also got to try and get all those bolts done up into the back of the turbo. Obviously turbo bolts get hot, so there's a bit of extra work in doing those. You want to make sure that they're very tight, yada yada yada. So there are some pros and cons to both units. I guess the pro with the new low mount, other than the sort of aesthetic of it being lower, more discreet, is that it looks like it flows much more efficiently. Also, the casting qualities and things on this are obviously a big step and a big change to what the original stuff was, as I went over in my kind of review video. The upsides to this existing setup is really just the accessibility to everything. Obviously the turbo seat tyre, some people like that look, some people don't. Personally, if it was me, I'd rather the discreet look. But that said, that's just an aesthetic thing, and function is much more important than kind of the looks for me, particularly when it's a track car where you're constantly fettling with it and reliability is kind of key. So there's a lot of benefits to keeping this setup that the low mount doesn't quite have, mostly just around that kind of accessibility, usability, being able to tweak and tune and fettle with things, remove things and reinstall them with much more ease than the new one. So I've had an interesting, realization that this Kraken low mount isn't quite what I want for this car. For the most part, it comes down to the way this existing Kraken high mount style manifold is just so easy to work on, accessible. All the nuts and bolts, all the plumbing are all quite conducive to being maintained for a track kind of situation, which is what this car is. Whereas this low mount, while the castings are so nice, the low mount style kind of discreet, stealthy look is very appealing. There's clearly a lot more work involved in getting it all to fit, and then being able to access everything and being able to maintain that ongoing. And on a track car where you're often in a pinch, that is perhaps a downside that this one is superior at. And I've kind of decided that instead of installing this Kraken on my car, I'll just donate it to one of you guys. Rather than give you my old used one, you can have a brand new low mount. It's a bit of an odd choice, I know, but I'd rather do what I think is right for me and what's right for the car than make a video for the sake of making a video. That's silly. So what's more important for me is that the car is right and that I can drive it, not video stuff. The video stuff is just something to share information. I don't have any commitments. I don't make any. I'm not going to do something just for the sake of a video to shoot myself in the foot. So for me, for my particular situation, the high mount Kraken, I've decided, is maybe not better, but it's going to work nicer for my setup. I'm not chasing umpteen tenths of a second and the ultimate limits of power or anything. You know, the turbo could definitely make more power if it wanted to. You just turn the boost up. It's not like I'm at the limits of the manifold or the dump or anything. So sure, this is going to be more sort of flow efficient, but I'm not really concerned that those flow differences would be enough to completely change the car, and the setup that's on it isn't anywhere near its limits. So perhaps if the power figure was 25% higher, on this car, then maybe this would suddenly become more of an option, because it would be able to handle the power better, because it would be able to flow more efficiently. The downside, as I say, is that serviceability. And I just feel like serviceability for me, for a track car, is one of the highest priorities that I'm not ready to compromise on. So with all that being said, would one of you like a Kraken low mount? I assume the answer is yes from at least someone out there. So to get it, all I want you to do is send me a picture of your car and tell me what you want to do with it. Nothing super long or special. I don't need a big long story or a sob story or anything. I just want to know that someone out there needs one. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you kind of can, but you know, this will put you in the right direction. And I like to see cars because cars are cool. So send me an email. The email address will be here. I'll also put that email address in the description, so you know, not hard. I'm sure you'll work out how to send an email. And just send me a pic of the car, say, hey, this is my car, and this is what my car does, or how I drive it, or what I want to do with it, or here's my plans, or here's why I want a Kraken. And this isn't a competition, consider it more of a donation. I just want to give it to someone who will put it to good use. That's it, really. Unfortunately, I can't give it to everyone. I've only got one of these sitting here. And shipping will be expensive, particularly international. So hopefully you're from Australia. I don't know. If not, oh well, I'll wear the cost. Obviously, it's coming up to Christmas time and there's this virusy thing going on, so maybe shipping will be slow. We'll see what happens. So I make no promises. All I promise is I'm going to try and send this to someone to use for their car. And I'm just going to keep this one. Obviously, yes, I know that means that I haven't actually committed to putting this in, but well, I don't want to, basically. I've decided I don't want to. I've decided that this one works better for me. I'm not a YouTube person that does stuff for the sake of doing stuff. I'm not going to do it just to say I've done it and then walk away disappointed. I build the car to drive it, not to make videos, if that makes sense. So I don't do this for a job or anything. I'm not willing to commit to investing that much effort in swapping manifolds to prove that it's a little bit better. I'm sure it is, but it'll be a lot of work. And what do I get out of that? Probably nothing, because then I'm going to have to swap it back anyway, because I'm going to be much happier with this one. Or in 12 months time, I'll be disappointed because I'll be fiddling around with this one trying to make something work, or you know, working on some sort of issue that's occurred whilst at the track, and it would be a massive inconvenience because it's a lot harder to work on deep in the engine bay here, rather than this one, which is just so nice to work on. I'm not talking the Kraken low mount down. All I'm saying is, for my particular situation, this one is the right choice. So yeah, I hope that makes sense and I don't sound like an asshole or anything, but yeah, it's my car, I'll do what I want, right? So if you want to have neons on your car, you have neons on your car. If you want to have spinning rims, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I might not like it, but you don't have to like what I do to my car. Yeah. Anyway, a bit of a weird one. We came into this video committed to installing some new Kraken stuff, and in the end, all I'm going to do is give it to one of you guys. So yeah, as I say, link in the description for how to send me an email, or you know, again, the email will be here. Send me an email with a pic of your car and a little bit of a story about you, why, or the car, what you want to do with it, why you need the Kraken. I'll let you know, and I'll make a video once we choose who gets the Kraken, or where it's going, or a bit of a story. Hopefully we find out what happens to it. Hopefully it gets installed and someone enjoys it and makes the big boosts. Yeah. Okay, that was a weird one. Weird video, one of the weirdest I've made. But nonetheless, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.